Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Hi. Good morning. We're going to go ahead and start. Sorry. Hi. Wayne is on the phone with a board member, so I hope he'll be joining us very soon. But I thought we'd go ahead and start. So good morning, everybody. Is there anybody new here that we haven't all met before? Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, Teresa Acosta. I'm the board consultant to Senator Vanessa Delgado. There's two others of us. Christian is not here and Sandra is not here, but you'll meet them at another time.
Welcome. We're very, very glad to have you aboard. And so why don't we go around the room? And you've probably met everybody, so we'll just do that real quickly. Sure.
I'll start. Guillermo Gonzalez, consultant to Supervisor Rangel Perez.
James Nemerty, consultant to Supervisor Garland.
Kevin Wong with Mark Caccioli.
Matt Holder, board consultant to Dwight Robinson, who's councilman in Lake Forest.
Paul Wright, information management and production.
Nancy Velasquez, governing board liaison.
Bill Glazier with Michael Caccioli.
Ron Ketchum with Larry Candace.
Tom Rose with Ed Benoit.
I'm Jill Wynot, Chief Operating Officer.
Bay Gilchrist, General Counsel.
All right, great. Thank you. So, do we still start at the back end of the agenda, or do we start? We do. Okay. All right. This is going well. It makes more sense because those are some of the more important items. This is actually probably going to be one of our longer board meetings. There are a lot of
Some of them only had the air monitoring plan.
and I think there's a couple that just had the emission reduction plan, and we have 3 with both. So we're really gluttons.
We're lucky that way.
Yes.
Special.
Quick question for you on that. You made a comment about a lot of potential public speakers, a lot of testimony on that.
Mm-hmm.
Do we envision those people speaking about how that plan should be stronger, or what are we expecting them to say?
I think, I expect that there may be some testimony on specific aspects of it. I think overall, we actually have pretty good consensus, particularly within the San Bernardino and the East LA communities, that overall, this is a good plan, but they may take the opportunity to highlight kind of certain aspects that they feel are most important, just to kind of put a little highlight on that. But overall, I think we've had the comments on those 2 plans have been relatively straightforward to address, and overall the committees seem, again, we seem to have some pretty good consensus that those plans are what they were looking for through this process. For Wilmington, I would say, overall, it seems that, we do have a lot of support for the actions that we wrote into the SERP. We are still continuing to work with some of the key stakeholders that have kind of submitted their comments on this last round. So we're working through this last group of comments where we feel that we are actually able to address the majority of those comments.
Jokey, maybe you could highlight some of the major concerns, such as the health effects, the baseline study requests, things like that, and sort of where we are, because I think that would probably be one area, especially in Wilmington, Carson, that I would expect to hear from. But also we've seen it in other communities.
Right. So I would say, I'll start with some of the comments that apply to all 3 communities, and then I'll kind of zoom into the Wilmington, Carson, West Long Beach community. So some of the general comments we received were, wanting to, have a better quantification of what emission reductions would result from these plans. So that's something that staff have worked on. We did the analysis to establish what the baseline conditions were. In other words, what the emissions from those communities would be, just based on kind of currently adopted rules and regulations for both South Coast AQMD as well as for CARB. And then we sought to quantify where we could what emission reductions we can get, either through incentives or through some of the regulatory actions for both us and CARB together. So overall, I would say, when we're looking at, for example, diesel PM emissions, which is kind of the the most critical air toxic contaminant for each of these 3 communities. We're looking at at least a 6% reduction by 2024. In some communities, it's greater, so about 9 to 10% reduction, and then an even greater percent reduction by 2029. So ranging from 13 to 15% reduction by 2029 for diesel PM. And again, that's specifically reductions that would occur within those communities. I think the other kind of main overarching comment that we heard was about this desire to use kind of health metrics to help track progress. And I think this is something that really has been discussed through the kind of CARB process at the statewide level. I think when we read the legislation and the intent of the legislation, it really directs us to put together a plan to reduce emissions. It does not direct us to conduct a health study. But we do recognize that reducing the emissions will have public health benefits, and we will track those we will definitely track those emission reductions through the actions that we've written in the CERC. But we do understand that there is this desire to have some kind of health tracking. I do know that CARB is working with OEHA right now to see if they might be able to develop a methodology that would be useful to do this kind of tracking. But I do understand that there are some technical limitations in terms of whether it's even possible to do this or whether it's effective to do this, and of course there's also a cost consideration.
Let me just add a little bit to that. So the process that Joe Kay was talking about at the state level was ARB had what was called a consultative working group, and that met, I would say, almost quarterly throughout the previous year. And within that, we had representatives from the districts as well as NGOs and other organizations. The reason I wanted to stress this is because some of the representatives at the consultative work group tried to pressure CARB to include the health studies. And what CARB and the districts really were very clear on is that the intent was for emission reductions. You were looking at funds that were being provided through Carl Moyer, through Prop 1B. It was all about emission reductions. And that if there was any desire to have health studies or baseline health information collected, that was something that they should go to the legislature for. And so it was really clarified at the consultative level, and yet people that were part of that then would come back to the community steering committee meetings and then try to make that same point. So the reason I say we're going to probably hear about it is, there are individuals who've been making this a big effort, but that's not what this program is about. So you'll hear about it, saying there's got to be these health baselines, there's got to be these studies. It's like, that's completely separate.
First of all, this has been a very long process, very transparent, very open, and it's been, as everyone kind of mentioned, a lot of meetings, so thank you for all of that. You said that there was 2 drafts that were put out, you explained those. When was the last kind of publicly available draft available?
That was released in, say, August? I'm sorry.
It's still August.
It's
I
a
want to say it
blur.
was about 2
Late
weeks
July,
ago.
early August, yeah.
Is that the one you mailed to us?
Yeah,
The
that
big
was
one?
the
Yes,
last.
that's right. That's the one that the board members received. That's
Okay,
right.
and that was similar to, or what was it, stationary committee, or different than that? The last
It
one?
had
That's right.
more
It was,
detail.
yes, it was released around the time of the stationary source committee, and so that was the one that was printed and mailed.
And then the follow-up is, you said that there was some more recent input that staff is continuing to go through. How does that fit in with what was received by the board members a couple weeks ago? And does that change? How does that affect things? I don't. With what we're seeing on the agenda, how does that new input affect what we're
Right.
looking at?
A lot of it honestly was clarifying language. So, that was, I would say, that constitutes many of the changes that we made. I would say an additional piece I would say the major change is really in the Wilmington, Carson, West Long Beach plan, particularly because we received a lot of comments on the refinery-related actions. And so that was really probably the biggest change that you'll see in this upcoming package. And in particular, so after that stationary source committee meeting, we still had our August set of steering committee meetings, and through that discussion with the steering committee, as well as through the comments that were received on that plan, we made a couple adjustments to what is Chapter 5A, which provides sort of an overview of all the actions in the SERP, including the emission reduction targets. We kind of clarified and maybe added a lot of specificity in terms of the emission reduction targets for refineries in particular. We already had some of the emission reduction targets on the mobile sources, but we also added in carbs emission reduction targets as well, because they've been provided since that time. And in addition to Chapter 5B, which is the chapter on the refinery-related actions, we reworked many of those actions. Some of them included some clarifying language. We received a lot of comments about flaring and some of the actions that we can take and the timelines that we can specify, so we added those. The committee also asked us to add what we were doing with the proposed Rule 1109.1 as an action into the plan, so that was subsequently added. And then again, kind of clarifying and trying to quantify where possible what emission reduction targets we could have for those actions.
I think there's a summary of responses to comments and a detailed response to comments that it will be new in the materials you'll get.
Okay, and that'll be kind of like an addendum kind of thing, like,
It's
incorporated
in
within
the documents.
the report.
okay.
Yeah, so that will be new too. So if you're asking, what do I need to reread?
Right,
5A, 5B, and the summary of responses to comments would be a great place to start.
okay. And because when I hear, like, when you say clarifying language, that, to me, when I hear that, it means that there's really no substantive changes, that things, so that, is that correct, or is that kind of an incorrect assumption on that part?
I think I would say there's a lot more information, and depending on who you are, you may view that as substantive,
Okay.
and you may not. I would say from our perspective, there are substantive changes in there with regards to the clarity and the level of detail. One of the questions or comments that we heard a lot about had to do with baseline data and what did the actual emission reductions mean in comparison to that. And so there's greater detail in that. We look at the percent reductions in comparison to the baseline. And we actually have very specific measures that I think, I would probably recommend that your members take a look at, because I think that additional clarity is really what the community groups were asking for.
Great. And I think one of the other things that we were doing is we're actually providing infographics and kind of summary tables, because we do understand it's a pretty thick document. So I don't know if I'm allowed to kind of show these, but you can kind of see like this is the sort of thing that example of what we're trying to do, trying to summarize 4 inches worth of of text in an infographic, what emission reductions, what are some of the elements of the plan, what are the actions, and highlighting what the actions within each air quality priority area. So we have one of these for each community.
Joe, you can pass those around. I know I've approved all of those.
Yes. Take a look. I'm sorry, I don't have copies for everybody.
And then just the final question on that is that the last group of comments that's kind of being reviewed, is that, how would you be able to kind of decide, like, separate out, like, were those coming from committee, were those coming from staff, community, where were those comments kind of coming from? You guys, it was all of the above?
So not so much from, CARB staff. I think CARB staff have we've really been working closely with them throughout this process. So they didn't necessarily submit formal comments per se, but they've sort of just been, working with us again throughout. We receive comments permanently from the steering committee members, as well as certain members of the public who've been participating, who've just been coming to our meetings and been engaged through this process, even though they are not a committee member. So it's a real mix. As far as the document goes, we try to organize them by theme rather than by commenter. So we kind of group them as, for example, comments about the rail yard emissions, comments about truck-related emissions, and so on.
But we do have a summary to comments, and then we have the response to comments.
That's right.
Maybe, did you talk a little bit about that previously?
No.
Maybe you want to just give a brief description of both.
Sure. So the response to comments, the larger document is a point by point. So basically for each comment that we received, you'll see the comment and then you'll see our response to that. So that's the document to look at if you want kind of all the detail. Wherever we have made changes in the document itself, we tried to highlight where that change occurred so that a commenter could see that it was reflected. And then we have the summary of all of the comments and responses. And that is maybe approximately a 5-page document for each of the communities. And this one, we've tried to kind of group them by theme. If several commenters made a similar comment, we tried to kind of group them into one and provide like a general summary of that, of the response. We also tried to indicate whether it was included in the SERP, whether basically their comment got integrated as a change, or perhaps was already there in the document, or whether it was something that we were not able to include, such as the health study.
Just to add a little bit to that, on the Wilmington, I think, short timer, what do you do?
Is he leaving for the room for good? Do we get a chance to say goodbye to him?
I offered him the opportunity and he said he's got another commitment that he had to do. So he left a mirror here who can answer any permitting related questions.
Stay Friday.
He's gonna come back and get a crystal.
Oh,
So,
Yeah.
nope, he snuck out on us.
The point that I wanted to make was that Wilmington comments are over 200 individual comments.
200 pages, right?
Oh, well.
How many hundreds?
I don't remember the specific number of the comments. Well, so I would mention this. We received written comments, of which I think there were, I'd say at least several dozen. And then we are also including in our response to comments the comments that were made verbally in our last couple steering committee meetings. And so we felt that, we didn't have to require someone to go and submit written comments for us to include something in the document or make a change or provide a specific response. So.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that just comments alone is that big, right?
It's thick.
A lot of interest.
I think the summary. Matt wanted to say something to you, Lockie.
Who wanted to say, well, maybe more than just me, but I wanted to say thank you for all of your great work. And, a couple of years ago, you took on reducing the backlog of permits, and you've done an amazing job with that. But just from a consultant standpoint, whenever I've had a question, a concern, or something like that, I knew that I could always rely on you to do a great job for the community, not only for me and for Dwight, but like for the whole district. And so when you skipped out, I was like, we getting robbed of our chance to say thank you to Lockie. But thank you for all your great work, and maybe there's some others that may want to say something as well. But thank you for everything that you do for us, and good luck in your new venture. I think it's going to be, you're going to have a great time.
Thank you for your kind words. It has been a pleasure, and a delight actually to work with all of you guys. And hopefully, I don't know, maybe our paths will cross again while I'm staying in the same field, so one way or another, we may continue working together. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Any other questions on 617?
I'm curious, how did you guys develop that localized emission inventory for each area? I find that interesting. I didn't know what to do with it. Seriously,
So it is, roughly based on kind of some of the previous work that we did in terms of emissions inventories for both the AQMP as well as emissions inventories for MATES. Making those cuts down to the community level does present some, technical challenges. I think, so we're actually working with the Air Resources Board staff on trying to kind of hammer out some of these kind of technical details. At the end of the day, when you make assumptions, sometimes when you make assumptions on a regional level, some of these assumptions may even out a little bit, but when you start cutting it to a small community level, some of those assumptions, may not necessarily hold. So I would say that what we did in terms of the emissions analysis is again kind of based on that previous data but updated to 2017, which is what ARB asked for as a base
The baseline year is 2017?
That's what they asked for the year one emission reduction plans, and then they asked for 2 milestone years, which are 2024 and 2029. And so when you see that data presented, that's how it's presented for 2017 emissions, and then projected emissions for 2024 and 2029.
Okay, and this is in CARB's guidance, the blueprint document, right?
I actually don't know if it's in the blueprint, but it's in one of their kind of associated guidance documents. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, so the next item is the annual report on the AB 2588 Toxic Hotspots program. You want to say a couple things about it?
Yeah, so that's just the standard annual report that we were required to do under the hotspots rule, just summarizing our activities throughout that year. The last annual report we did was in September of last year, so this is just another one to summarize what we can do throughout the year.
Any questions on that? Okay, then we're ready to go to page 2, back to the start of the agenda. So we've got some math items.
Yeah, so item number 2 is a SEP with EPA, so it's a supplemental environmental project. It's for World Oil had a penalty with EPA. The EPA has asked us to administer the SEP to do air filters in a school that's very close to that facility, so they're giving us about $168,000 to do that. Install school filters. We'll be using that here. Any questions on that one? Now, moving on, so the third one, this is a bit of an unusual project. You may recall that we funded a technology provider to do borrow solids to renewable natural gas in Rialto to produce a natural gas station. That technology provider, Core, was subsequently also funded by us and SoCalGas to further optimize the system at a location in Los Angeles, as part of the SoCalGas property and facility. Unfortunately, what occurred after that is the technology provider, Core, canceled the Rialto project, the first project, and by doing so, they triggered a termination without cause clause in our contract. Now, rather than kind of going after them legally for a clawback provision to recoup some of our funds, we want to see the technology work. We want to see them produce a renewable fuel. So we gave them a deadline to say, if you're not making, you need to make some significant progress by June 30th of 2019 and identify a commercial site to do an alternate fueling station. And so that date has passed, and we wanted to bring to the board's attention rather than just allowing another contract extension. So they knew that they were on the hook. The board was going to be evaluating whether they should continue or not.
Matt, you might want to mention the September extension. Because we approved from June.
Yeah, right, so we approved them from June through September, such that it would give us time to go back to the board and have the board provide their guidance. So we did approve a small extension, but we want the board to give their blessing on a further extension. And miraculously, they've been making a lot of progress now. So there are big pieces of equipment at the site. They've got the feeder that's going to take the renewable solid pieces into the auger and that which will be fed into the pyrolysis unit. So at this point, staff's recommendation is you do allow them to move forward. The intent is to do a variety of different renewable feedstocks and produce either renewable natural gas or renewable hydrogen or both. And so we're hopeful that the technology will eventually become successful. But our recommendation is at this time is to allow them to continue.
Questions or comments on that, Paul?
So does this relate to the organic, the diversion thing?
Somewhat. I mean,
What's the feedstock?
The
It's just
feedstock-
green waste, or is it all organics that we're supposed
No,
to
so
grow in our
originally,
apple cores?
yeah, originally the feedstock was gonna be a solid biochar from a wastewater facility, and no one else is really doing that, so it was kind of a very unique and opportunity for us to take this potential feedstock that people actually have to pay folks to haul away. But now they're looking at a variety of feedstocks. So the initial test at SoCal Gas will be wood chips. But the intent is to look at a variety of different feedstocks.
See what works.
So it could be this, this organic diversion issue. There are no further questions on that one. The next one is also mine, number 4. So every year, the state receives funds as part of the Moyer program. And so what they've done then is divided to the different area districts. And so this year, they're providing us $3.5 million to do toward Moyer programs. And we were just recently closed our Moyer solicitation, and we were heavily oversubscribed, like 5 times, I can't remember now. I think it was more, like 10 times more projects were received than we had funding for. So this is simply going into that queue to pay for additional projects. No other questions?
This is all off-road?
We are going to direct it toward off-road projects. Yeah. Those are the most cost-effective.
How's the technology coming for heavy-duty off-road?
Right now, it's just Tier 3 and Tier 4 engines, right? But we're actually working on several projects to look at other further mitigation that can be done with new technologies. But electric and fuel cells are still pretty far off. Yeah.
For something super heavy-duty? Okay.
Okay, next item 5, Derek.
Sure, this item is to increase 2 of our consultants' contracts. I'll give you background on this. We have originally 2 consultants up in Sacramento. One of the firms split and they created 2 firms. We want to keep them both. So we, instead of going back mid-year for a change in the budget allocation, we kept them. And then we basically split their existing original contract that we have with the original firm in 2. But essentially what that did was create a disparity in what all the firms are getting. So firms originally were each getting typically $143,000. Actually what happened was that we increased one of the consultants' contracts because we had them do additional work. But now consultants are getting substantially less than what the third firm is getting, about it's about $39,500 less than what the third firm is getting. So we just want to make them move back on par. So that's what this item is.
Quick question for you on that one. You mentioned that we provide additional funding because of the increased workload of one firm.
Yes.
Are these firms doing an equitable amount of work, or are we just trying to make
They're all
them?
doing the equity, same amount of work for us.
And then my other question would be, would that one initially approved previously just doing less work initially? If they're all on the same level of work now, we're just chasing, it sounds like.
I'm sorry, say that again.
The first firm that we increased the value on, if they got.
We didn't increase. Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, because we're
Yes.
now making parity, but the
Yes.
question was, if they're on the same level of work product, were we overpaying historic? What's the story there?
So the story on that was that originally they were supposed to be doing a certain amount of work, and we've asked them to do additional work that was outside the scope of the original work. So that's why they got more money. When they split, like I said earlier, they basically cut that contract in half and split it evenly. So that's how that's all transpired.
Maybe I'm confused, I'm just, the quantity of work I'm concerned about.
The quantity, for also originally, what they were doing when we increased the budget, right, Mr. Andreas? When we increased the budget, they're essentially doing the same thing now, what they were doing when they originally got the bump up. Okay, but now it's split up between two firms. So there's disparity in what they're getting with the other two firms. Maybe I'm not answering your question.
No, I think we're getting to what I'm looking at. I don't necessarily, my concern, we have, at the county where we have plenty of firms up in Sacramento as well, and the way I was viewing this as we had a firm, we split it into two, or I should say, they split it into two, and I would imagine they were still doing the same quantity of work, just either in partnership or separate now.
Separate.
They're separate, but the catch is, they're not both doing 100% the same job, they're splitting that cost. I mean,
They're doing, well, all three firms are doing equal amount of work, that's the way it is. Two of the firms are getting paid less.
What is the total for the three?
So for the three, so it'll be 286. One firm getting 143. I'm sorry, I added that wrong. So they're getting, three firms, it's 208 plus 143, so that's 3.
No, 42.
208 plus 143, 351. The three firms.
No further comments or questions?
Just one quick question on the math, I'm sorry. So they're right now making, the total budget for the three is 351. So the increase would bring them all to 143, so 429 for the three. Okay, just wondering, because it just, the way that it was described was a little confusing, thank you.
Sorry about
No, it's
Maybe more of a comment than a question, but if, maybe for future planning, that if it's, if there's enough work to have an additional lobbying firm, maybe we should have had an additional lobbying firm for a longer period of time, maybe going back a year or two. I mean, is this, I guess kind of what I'm getting to is is somebody making up work to justify the additional lobbying firm?
So like the two firms, the partners have their own specialty that they used for us. And so when the two firms split, right, we want to retain those two because they all each have their own specialty. And so rather than, get rid of them, we decided to keep them at a much lower payment, but we want to bring them back up to parity because they are doing essentially what they were doing before, but now they're getting actually paid less compared to the third firm. We just want to have parity with all three firms. Am I creating more questions than answers? That's the way it looks like.
I think we maybe are taking the same information and going to do a different conclusion. So that's all. So, thank you.
Sure. Okay, John, you want to talk about the next item, the Advanced Building Energy Management Project?
Yes, good morning. This item is to amend a contract with Willvan Energy Solutions, who are implementing advanced building energy management projects for us. And the item is to add an amount not to exceed $665,000. The pre-commercial efficiency projects that are being done here are being funded through a $3.9 million CEC grant award and $2.2 million from the South Coast AQMD. The projects that we're going forward with will increase the efficiency of the building by over 20%, which should lead to yearly energy cost savings of over $200,000. And the projects will be a case study and a showcase for new building infrastructure technology. Two of the major projects that we're looking at are the replacement of our central plant equipment and the retrofit of the lab's fume hoods. And the money that we're adding to the contract is to cover unexpected current and future costs for parts of those major projects. The money will be added to the contract only on an as-needed basis, and the funding is available currently in the district's infrastructure improvement fund. Happy to answer any questions.
So pre-commercial is new stuff that's not off the shelf, so what are some of the things you guys are doing?
Aaron's here to help with the
Yeah, well,
technology
initially,
stuff.
the chillers were pre-commercial, they're now on the market. But these will be the first chillers implemented supposedly in California with this new refrigerant. It's a hydrofluoroolefin instead of a hydrofluorocarbon. So it's not a greenhouse gas, it's also not an ozone cleaner. We also, the fume hoods, once again, was sort of pre-commercial technology, but they are now available in the market. But they're just not widely implemented.
So how do they work? I'm not an engineer, but just curious.
The chillers?
Either or.
Well, okay, so the chillers, it's refrigerant cycle essentially. So essentially we're demonstrating a highly efficient chiller with this new refrigerant. So it kind of goes to the state's short-lived climate goals where they use these new refrigerants that are not going to be persistent in the atmosphere as greenhouse gases. The fume hoods right now, the laboratory, we have 12 fume hoods. The air comes in the laboratory, gets heated and cooled, goes right out the fume hoods. There's no control. Pull the sashes down. There's a bypass. So what they're going to do is close off the bypass, put a control system on the sash, and the new, what they call venturi valves, will be adaptable to the flows or fume hoods. There's also a lighting component to this project where we're going to demonstrate some new office lighting where they're LEDs and they're going to dim based on the windows in the office space. And they go through what's called a circadian rhythm where they'll change colors during the day to hopefully increase productivity, but we'll see how that works.
That's pretty cool.
If you want to take a look at the chillers, I mean, they're as old as this building, they're pretty much falling apart. They look like, we're lucky to get through as much of the summer, so we really need to get them replaced. If you are in our parking lot where we have the original row of the solar chargers over on the employee side of the parking lot, you can look over that little wall and you can see these two ginormous chillers. And you can just get a sense of the scale of the equipment, the size of the equipment, and our staff has done a really good job maintaining it so that it's lasted well beyond its lifetime.
How old are they?
How long have you been in this building?
Building 30 years.
Just about 30 years old.
Is that right?
Almost, yeah.
The useful life on those is 25 years. So
Yeah,
the
so,
fact that we were able to get 30 years.
Plus 5.
I was going to mention there's one more component that we're hoping to get funding for in the future. It's a DC lighting component where the lights in the laboratory will be LEDs, fed by DC from the solar panels in the front, also fed by batteries, so they're completely off-grid. But I don't want to make them off-grid in case that system doesn't work, so that's not quite been implemented anywhere.
Pretty cool. And you can use like old car batteries for,
That'd be an option.
like old Tesla batteries or Volt batteries or something, because they can't,
Right.
they're no good for the car, but they
The cycle
could be good for
that
storage.
application is much more beneficial, yeah.
it's an interesting project. Okay, on the next page, the top of page 4, number 7, that's a standard report from the MSRC. Any questions on that? Okay, and Sarah, you have the next item?
Yeah, so this is an item to request approval of membership rosters for 2 advisory groups. So this is staff during the development of the upcoming AQMD. So these are both advisory groups that we've had in the past, but their current membership terms have expired. So we're seeking to get approval of these rosters and have that reinstated.
The final agenda will come out tomorrow. How late can we make changes to the roster? For San Bernardino County, we're still kind of kicking around who's
So
tomorrow.
Tomorrow by noon, maybe, would be ideal.
Never mind.
And otherwise you could make a change, the board could make a change at the board meeting, but that might open up a can of worms on an item that would otherwise be on the consent calendar, but you have options.
Okay, that's what I figured. Never mind.
Okay, items 9 and 10 on this, the next section is pretty much the routine reports, so information only received and filed. Any questions on 9 through 14? Or anybody from staff have anything you need to highlight on any of those? Not seeing any. Okay.
I'm having trouble hearing, and I wonder if other people are. And is this going remotely to somewhere else, or it is being recorded, right? Hadn't we used microphones in the past?
So we're having audio problems with the webcast. And what we're gonna end up doing is when we post this, we'll have the audio corrected. So right now, if you're listening to the webcast, that's probably the audio problems you're referring to. Is that what you're talking about, Harvey?
I'm having trouble hearing.
Oh, just right
your
now?
voice, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And
We'll,
other people.
we'll speak louder to the extent that we can.
Harvey, the microphones in here are just for recording, not for amplification. It's too small of a room.
All right, I'll try and project more. All right, so any questions on those other items?
13.
13?
So ISR gets kicked to May?
You want to talk about that, Carol?
ISR.
Which one?
Yes. So which ISR was it about? The
Warehouse.
I got this.
Warehouses?
Goes
Yeah.
to May.
So yeah, we're right now looking at moving that
Okay.
on, yeah.
Okay. So public comment then? All right, so now we'll open it up if there's any public comment
Public comment on the agenda,
on the agenda.
item number 1.
Thank you. Okay, seeing none. Is there any other business?
I'm sorry. When you said item 1, I thought you just
Oh,
meant.
item 1 is the entire agenda, so if you have a public comment, you're welcome to come up. Thank you, Susan.
Just gonna step over it.
Be careful.
So I'm Susan Stark with Marathon Petroleum, and I wanted to talk about agenda item, I think it's 25C, the Wilmington, Carson, West Long Beach SERP, Community Emission Reduction Plan. And I know Joe Kay had mentioned that there were changes to 5A and 5B, particularly in regard to refineries. And I would have to say I agree with Wayne that I feel that these changes are more substantive than just clarifying. And WISPA, the Refinery Association, did receive the proposed changes in writing last night to take a look at. And we appreciate also that staff had a call with us on Tuesday morning of this week. But that was the first that we had learned that there were being some significant changes made to the metrics. So we knew that there was a 50% goal for reduction in flaring emissions if feasible. But what we learned Tuesday morning and saw in writing last night was additionally there's going to be proposed 50% reduction in NOx emissions and a 50% reduction in VOCs. And it was mentioned that baselines are important, and we certainly agree. We're not sure that we understand the baselines that are going to be used. We haven't had too much time to look at it, so probably having a little more time will help. But it looked like on the NOx, what was being referred to or referenced was the 2016 AQMD and the measure CMB05, which was the next reclaim shave. That was kind of before AB 617 came in. And that was a 5 ton a day shave, but for all 265 reclaim facilities, it was a general requirement, not just for refineries. So we're a little uncertain that baseline. And then for VOCs, as I understand it, looking at this, the baseline isn't even set yet. That will be looked at during next year. They'll be collecting data from our fence line monitoring that will be ongoing, the community monitoring that will be ongoing, leak detection and repair reports, and other advanced monitoring techniques that the district is employing, has been and will continue to do. And so after all that data is collected, they'll be setting a baseline. So it seems premature to set a 50% reduction target before we even know what the baseline is going to be. So we're not disputing that there shouldn't be metrics. Metrics are an important part of 617, but it does seem important that it is based on information we all know and understand. So I would ask that we delay putting the metrics in the version that goes next week, to come back at a future date in 2020, or maybe at a future board hearing, even at the end of this year, December perhaps, where we can have a better sense of what the metrics are. Go ahead and adopt the discussion draft or final draft, I forget the terminology, perhaps from July, and commit, have the board members direct staff to come back with more, appropriate metrics based on information that we all understand. Sorry, I went over.
So I'm going to actually respond to that, Susan, because I think that I don't know to what extent you can appreciate the dynamic between the community groups and CARB. And CARB's position has been to us thus far that if the community steering committee members want an issue, it should be identified within the community emission reduction plan. And so I think what we tried to do was to really thread the needle in terms of, we don't want to be pre-decisional with regards to the establishment, but again, these are goals, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to get that, but in the latest round, which, to be honest, I've only seen this morning and I'm still not even done, we talk about how we're actually going to define that baseline, sort of looking at what the emissions are without any additional work in terms of the existing rules and regulations that are on calendar. And then depending on like what you were saying, whether you're looking at VOCs and you're looking at reduced emissions, we've got to understand what those are. So we talk about the fact that it's going to be proscriptive. My concern is that if we don't do it this way, let me be clear. The board members are not approving the plan tomorrow. They are adopting the plan. CARB is the one that approves the plan. The part that we don't want to do is we don't want to be in a position where the board adopts the plan and then CARB comes in after the fact and changes that plan. So that's why we're trying to be as inclusive and still provide the latitude that we hope will provide you with comfort. All of those that look into that. And then the one point that I would say that I always make is that, it's one thing for the community steering committees to say, we want this included in the CERT. That doesn't mean that it's binding on our board, that it's binding on ARB. So in terms of threading the needle, recognizing what the community steering committee and members have asked for, but also trying to make sure that we have the latitude to come about it in a way that I think addresses your concerns. So I hope you can appreciate that, and that's how I just wanted to let you know our thoughts on that. I mean, obviously, if you wanted to make those comments at the governing board meeting, feel free to do so. But that's kind of where our thinking is. And I would ask Joe Kay if there's anything you want to add to that, or
I definitely agree. It's like, and again, these are goals that are specified within the plan. The statute does direct us to have some emission reduction targets. But I would also mention that, as we have written, tried to footnote and highlight in within chapters 5A and 5B, that of course anything having to do with the regulatory requirement or rule requirement will go through your standard rule development process where we conduct a technical analysis. I think from there, we will have more specific data, more specific numbers, regarding that mission that rule addresses. So, this is not to presuppose that rule development process, but I think at the end of the day, we do have to start with some goals, knowing that technical assessment will also have to be done.
Well, if I could just say, because I'm a alternate member of the steering committee as well, I would think once the SERP is adopted, the committee members are going to be looking for it to be achieved.
We should probably move on with the other public comment. just to avoid, just to avoid.
Susan, if you like, we can talk about it. Peter, and then Harvey.
I'll be quick, and I actually filled that out very quickly. I'm sorry, Peter Whittingham, Public Affairs Advisors. To follow up on something you said, Wayne, if I remember correctly, at the presentation in July, Dr. Fine said that upon the board's action next Friday, staff would start implementation of those because you don't anticipate that CARB would ultimately be acting on those until probably the spring, correct? So I guess to Susan's, while it's not official and final, action will be going forward here relatively soon to start implementing those recommendations. So I guess if you could just speak to that a little bit, I wanted to follow up on that. So thank you.
Sure. So I'm going to ask Joe K. Joe K, how many action items were there in the Wilmington Carson? Was it 49? Or was that
49
total?
across all three communities.
And so within the Wilmington Carson, what was the, do you know the breakout?
I don't remember the breakout.
So I guess in response to your question, Peter, there are a number of items that we can move forward on. And, part of the challenge on this is the actual implementation. And as you all know, the budget aspect is going to be very tight. So there are a number of things that I think that we'll be able to address. I don't think we're going to do everything all at once, moving forward all at once. And I think that probably for some of the more controversial items, I think we have room to continue the dialogue.
Great.
What we can start right away is incentive money, getting the incentive projects going if we have the funding for that, the outreach, the education. And obviously rural development takes, as you know, a good amount of time. So we're not going to be adopting a rule for refinery reductions before ARB's approval of the plan. So
Is that some of those measures and for the refinery and some of those actions, there were two steps in it. And the first step is data collection, looking at the feasibility of what we could do and collecting emissions data and testing and things like that.
So we're going to move on this one because we're kind of getting into a little bit more than I think what the agenda calls for. Harvey, you patiently waited. You're up.
And it looks like Harvey's submitted cards for items on the board agenda and then a card for public comment separately. So Harvey, you'll have 3 minutes for the agenda items and then 3 minutes for public comment, general. Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Harvey Etter. I'm speaking for myself and for the Public Solar Power Coalition. In reference to the agenda items, in reference to, I think it was number 5 about renewable natural gas, there are real problems with renewable natural gas. And this also, all of this relates to the Solar New Deal. Part of the Solar New Deal is about 100 exhibits. And it was public information request on the 16-17 plan. It was put to the record here. There are about 6 of them on drug-resistant antibiotics and antifungals. And it's being spread through the gas distribution system, through waste, okay? It's a big problem. It's totally being put under the rug with Porter Ranch and all what's going on. Okay, these 25 A, B, and C, we gave to Dr. Diane Sanchez 2-3 months ago and to others at these meetings. The thumb drive of the Solar New Deal from 16-17, this is copyrighted, it's in the record. It's now part of the Environmental Protection Agency's review of this, which they did no review for 18 months. The district didn't do anything. The state CARB didn't do on the SIP. And the environmental groups had given notice of 60 days, which is over now. And we hope to work with them in giving notice on that. Also doing backsliding and whistleblowing. So we hope to work, spoke with Adrian last week and hope to work with him on this. The word is that next month, the Federal Environmental Protection Agency is going to write something out, which they haven't done yet. And then following that, we'll respond with litigation and whatnot. I'd like to find out what's happening in-house with staff, and I think this group should be educated about this. This is stuff that's for real, and it's happening right now. It's also interfacing with a $16.3 trillion proposal from Bernie Sanders. On the 4th, 10 different Democratic representatives on CNN for the climate discussions. Is not official, it's part of CNN. Hope to work with them on that. So these are part of the plan. I understand from Dr. Sanchez that she's reviewing it. Also, we put in, so everything that's on the record now for, that we put in the record that for what was published on the 17th of June and was responded to within 30 days and has been given 60-day notice and now following with litigation, and there's changes happening anyway. So that was the first 3 minutes, yes?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll just kind of
So
extend
then the
it.
next one would be for public comment. Let me just check, were there any other public comments on the agenda? Okay, so now we're public comments.
Okay, so I have not seen what Dr. Sanchez is working on, and I'm not happy about it. Also, these 3 plans and what you were discussing among yourselves, maybe it was available to members of this group, but they should have been available to the public and whatnot. Everything now, here today and before. There's major changes that are happening. Okay, the recent reports say that it's a 3-way race now. Sanders is down to like 20%, along with Warren. Sanders, Biden, and Warren are all at 20%. All right, that's the latest, and that's the real world. Trump a week ago is declaring himself the second coming and bringer of the Jubilee and all this stuff. Responding to backing in Israel and from Christian fundamentalist groups. Anyway, there's other stuff coming up, and it's all happening fast. And it's all part of, from February 8th of the Administrative Committee of the Board, 51-minute meeting starting at 10 o'clock. About 12 minutes was with me and Dr. Burke, and at the very end with Wayne. And so this is all part of getting that information together. He said that he wanted us to put this together, and it wouldn't take 800 pages. Quote, he'd take a few pages here and there and whatnot. Well, this is all in play, and it's in the courts and whatnot, in the courts of public opinion, along with 20% of the oxygen burning in the Amazon. Also in Alaska, they broke 90 degrees, the hottest day ever in Anchorage, 94 in Fairbanks. We've got a bad situation we've got to deal with.
Thank you, Harvey. Okay, so with that, I think we're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Could I ask a question in regard to meeting our .084 standard in 2023, is it? Clearly, we're not going to make it, and I'm just wondering, when do the federal sanctions possibly kick in if we don't need it?
There's a number of different factors in terms of when that could happen. And we're actually evaluating those now as we speak.
I think the board needs to be informed because I think we've had 50 days this year already of being over .084. So it's clear that we're not going to be the standard by 2023.
We're working on it.
But the good news is Coachella Valley may meet it because they seem to be doing pretty good this year.
Well, overall, we're doing better this year than we were last year. And in large part, that was because of meteorological conditions. But we're also seeing reduced emissions as we progress.
Thing is, about until August, climate-wise, we were below average for most of the year until we hit August. And then it's August.
Still
It's hot. It's August.
All right, thank you all very much.
Thanks, everyone.
So we're having trouble getting audio, so this is the one meeting I usually want to be late for.
Oh.
And my watch stopped, because I still use a